God and Other Delicacies has a weekly newsletter. If you'd like to subscribe, email me at godsdelicateshow@gmail.com and I'll put you on the list. Hello, everyone. Welcome to God and Other Delicacies. I'm Nicholas D'Augusto. I get to talk to people about God on this show. I love it. I'm glad you're here. Let's get into it. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Jessalyn Gilsig to the show. Jessalyn is an award-winning actor and producer who has had regular and recurring roles on extraordinary series like Boston Public, Nip Tuck, Glee, Vikings, and Scandal, among many other projects. She's also a talented voice and stage actor, and in fact, she and I met while performing the world premiere of Eliza Clark's Quack at the Kirk Douglas Theater here in Los Angeles. She's a mother, an artist, and a wonderful person, and it's an honor to have her on my show. Thank you for being here, Jessalyn.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. Thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure. It's easy to write. I was like, I knew a lot of these things about you, but I went looking, I was like, my God, do you know I did an episode on Boston Public? That was one of my first episodes. I did, I don't know, like what seasons, were you there for?
I don't know. I was just there for the first 2 seasons.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know if I was in the first 2. I feel like maybe I was not. I feel like I was maybe like episode 3 or 4, but I remember kissing one of the teachers. I went in. So do you remember when Adrian Brody kissed, who was it? Was it Halle Berry that was presenting him?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so that was like a big thing.
Yeah.
Like he kissed her when he got the award.
Yeah.
And so Boston Public kind of wrote an episode out of that.
Oh, I see.
And I won a music award at the high school. I was a cello player. My character was a cello player. And they paid for cello lessons, by the way. How sweet was that?
Amazing.
Yeah. And then I go up and I kiss, and I forget the actress's name, but she was one of the teachers and one of the regulars on the show. And it was like the big, that was the big thing. Like I walked up and was so excited. I kissed her and there was all this fallout,
That's so funny. I thought you were going to say, I kissed a student on the show, of course, as a teacher.
Oh yeah, this is like something they were doing all the time, I guess.
Yeah, and I took a lot of showers at the school too. I remember after school, I was always showering. And I was like,
Jessalyn,
do public school teachers shower a lot at school?
Yes, I'm sure. This is like one of the many things
Lauren
that
Davis
women are finally people are finally listening to, like how odd it is that the things that people have made attractive women do on TV shows for no reason whatsoever.
No reason, just caught in the shower. But
here
I remember
I
kissed this student, and then I remember I was walking in New York one day, and I thought you were going to say that it was you, and this woman stopped me, and she said, "You kissed that kid?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Is he a good kisser?"
How wonderful.
Yeah.
And how did you answer? Yeah, it was fine.
I mean,
I didn't feel very comfortable talking much more about that.
Basically, it was inappropriate, but I always remember that. Yeah.
I like that you indulged her, though. You didn't chastise her. You're like, no, he's good. He's fine.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, listen, we have our public way that we talk about intimate scenes that we do, and then obviously we're human, so sometimes
yes,
you do feel things. You're not actually dead inside.
Were you married at that point when you were shooting the show?
Oh gosh, no. That was 20 years ago.
It's insane because that makes me, that makes sense because that was probably 16 years ago for me. So that says that I was probably in season 4 or 5. But yeah, there you go. Right. So you were probably at the beginning of your career relatively, right?
That's what brought me to LA. I had just moved to LA from New York because I had met David Kelly on The Practice.
Oh, wow.
And then he did
right.
Boston Public, and that's what moved me to Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. What a great start, man.
Yes.
Okay, so speaking of starts, the way we always start here is, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Okay, so I knew you were going to ask me this question because I listened. And so last night I had made a plan to eat a really good breakfast so that I could impress you.
Oh my gosh, I love the thought into this
much.
And I also love the fact that you're going to fail.
I did. Because then I got up and I had to get my daughter ready for school, which you can relate to. Mm-hmm. And there was a lunch to make and her breakfast to make, which is different from my breakfast. So I actually ended up having a cup of coffee, some berries, and a spoonful of Nutella.
So the berries, great. Coffee, I totally relate. The spoonful of Nutella, look, I'm not going to look down on that.
It was delicious.
That.
So it was just my birthday, and
Very
that's
European.
What my daughter gave me for my birthday because she knows that I love Nutella, and I eat it as if it's yogurt which it is not.
Right.
It might have protein in it. It has hazelnuts.
Probably.
And
It's nuts but heavy chocolate and the hazelnuts, right?
Yeah.
Is the deal?
And I love
Okay.
it. And she doesn't like it. So if there's a jar in the house, there's only one person who might have eaten it, and it's me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the rare occurrences where something that would be such a delicacy and such a delectable treat isn't like fought after the child. Like I grew up with,
Right.
I was in the middle of 5 and my mom would bring home like a box of Little Debbie's or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I would grab one, even if I didn't want to eat it right then, and I would hide it in my room and save it because
Sure.
my family the deal was with like 5 kids, they were gone the minute it was brought home.
Yeah, I
so
can
would
only
just
imagine.
like, so you're not feeling this pressure at all for one of your favorite treats.
I have a problem where my daughter she's more like you. She's so self-controlled that she doesn't eat any of her treats. And I have said to her, if you don't eat these, you cannot expect them to be here.
That's
because
amazing.
I have no self-control.
Right.
So I will, for example, she still has her Easter chocolate sitting on the table and it haunts me. And
Yes.
these little bunnies are just staring at me. And I'm trying to be a good parent and not break into them. But she doesn't care. I don't know. She likes receiving the treat, but then actually has no interest in consuming it. She might not be my child. It's possible.
Well, it actually gives me some sympathy for my mother too. Like I never really paid attention to this, but I did the same thing. You know, we'd get a pillowcase full of candy. I mean, when on like Halloween, and I would save all the best ones. For some reason, like my deal was I would save all the coolest ones, eat the crappy ones, and then I'd forget to kind of eat them later. And then my mother would eat them. She'd find because she knew where everything was in the house. She would often go, like if I wanted her thing is like a titch of chocolate, like the word titch. Do you use that word?
No,
titch?
I like
That's
that
like one of
word.
my mother's words. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's like regional, but she's like, oh, just a titch of chocolate. This is like her thing. And she would go up and get a titch of chocolate from Nick. And, but I think, and I don't know it'll be interesting as your daughter gets older, if she can articulate this, or maybe she can articulate it now, but I'm one of those guys that likes to fast sometimes. So I actually get like a certain weird psychological benefit from like seeing something and saying no to it.
Right.
I don't know why that is.
I think she's a little that way too.
It's like kind of a power game I
Yeah.
play with myself sometimes. And talking about it now makes me realize that I do it, but it's sort of interesting.
That is interesting. I think she is that way. She has more self-control than any person I've ever met.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. So maybe, when's your birthday?
April 17th. She an April baby? No. All right, well, let's get into the easy stuff. How and when were you introduced to the idea of God in your life? I am so adoring how I slam into this question with people. And even though you know it's coming, like,
Yeah.
it just makes me really happy because it's such a, I don't know, this is like a topic, obviously I'm doing this show, I love talking about it.
Yeah.
But I also love that it's like, how do you start? You know, I love watching people try to like rev up the machine. Where are you going to start?
Well, it's interesting because, as I said earlier, thank you for having me, and thank you for even inviting this kind of exploration, because for the past few days I've really been reflecting on this and trying to figure out exactly where it sits in me.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
It's really interesting. It's a nice gift, and
Wow.
I hope that kind of prompts it in everybody, because I imagine it's going to be different. As many people as there are that many relationships to this subject, and I definitely have been grappling with this. The definition of God versus religion, because the truth is that I don't have the best relationship with any of this subject, because my mother was raised Catholic and my father was raised Jewish, and
Where are you in the world or the country? I know where you're from.
So
but
I'm from Montreal. My mother came from England. She was born in 1939, and my dad was born in 1940. And he was born in Montreal, but his parents came from Eastern Europe, and they fled the Cossacks.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then anyone who stayed behind perished in the Holocaust.
Of course.
So if you
Wow.
meet anybody who has my last name, they are my first cousin.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot
That's
there.
extraordinary.
And my parents were unique because at that time they met and they fell in love and they decided to get married, and neither of them converted. And my father had a deep distrust of the church, which I think was warranted. And my mother has a very deep attachment to the church because she was raised Catholic. She was taught by nuns, and she was excommunicated because she was not married in the church.
Oh, wow. Of course. I mean, of course, because I know that was the story. But when you hear, every time I hear somebody talk about it as like, this is the emotional weight that my parents carry, it just brings it home. It takes it out of the history books and really makes it real how punishing the church has been to people. And I know that it's important that we understand that people continue to have, and here's your mother, even though she was punished with this, she still had an affinity, is what you're going to talk about. But, nonetheless, the punishment that the church has handed down for these types of transgressions over the years is just extraordinary. But anyway,
that's exactly it. So but you're articulating it. I mean, I was mostly worried that I wouldn't be able to articulate this, but that's exactly what I'm describing. So my first introduction to God in that formal sense associated with religion, was a lot of pain.
Wow.
We were not, for a long time, we were not accepted by the Jewish side of the family. Wow. And for a long time, we were not accepted by some of my mother's family.
Can I ask a quick question? So they meet in Montreal?
They did. They met in Montreal.
Okay. So they both left for different reasons. Your father's, how young was your father when he left?
So my father was born in Montreal.
He was born in Montreal.
Were born in Eastern Europe. Yeah.
So your grandparents left.
Yeah.
And and it was the same with your mother. Your mother
my mother
actually
came
was
to Montreal
born in England.
in the 20s. Yeah, she was raised in London, so lived through the war, which was kind of incredible. She was 6 when it ended.
Wow.
And then my father, I have a lot of stories of him raised in Montreal. A lot of anti-Semitism. I mean, we experienced it. We had bomb threats when we were kids.
Wow.
Because he worked within the French community, and he tried really hard to kind of bridge into a different world, and we really suffered for it.
Wow.
So, and then
as a young child, you're not hearing them directly, but you would hear your parents talk about, we've received a letter that says, stop doing what you're doing, or there's a bomb threat, or you'd hear them talk about it, or would they talk to you directly about it? Or would you you'd sense and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to really get into this conversation?
I mean, we knew because my dad is very vocal about anti-Semitism, and he's very aware of it, and he wanted us to be aware of it because he knew that this was something that we were going to deal with for the rest of our lives.
Rightfully so.
So I think we were pretty out in the open about it.
Wow.
And there was this idea that in some ways, just by nature of your blood, that you have some kind of target on your back, which is proving to be more and more true.
Oh, it's
major
horrible.
Resurgence.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrifying that. It's a larger concept. It's a larger topic, obviously, but the point is that in some ways, many people felt that anti-Semitism was dying away.
Right.
And
we were
naive. We were naive.
Yeah.
The resurgence is just as strong as it's ever been, in the sense of how much of the population can still be convinced of this type of stuff.
It's horrific. And so there was all this at play from a very young age. And then, so there was, like you say, there was this sort of global, larger outside of our front door tension. And then there was some tension within the home because my mother still had a lot of, my understanding, and I really am reticent to speak for her, but I know that she felt a lot of pressure / guilt. And so she wanted to honor her holidays, for example, and Easter was a very emotional time for us. And then it was, when can we get the Christmas tree? And my dad, wouldn't want it in the house too early. We didn't have Christmas decorations outside of the house. But then we would also do all the Jewish high holidays, which, to my mother's credit, I have to say she prepared and she learned how to do. And we always did Passover, and we always did Hanukkah, and we did everything. And my dad, over the years, came to embrace at least the ritual of Christmas as a family gathering and exchanging of gifts and this sort of thing. But, my mother would want to go to Mass on Christmas Eve, and that would be, it's not that he was angry. He never asked her to convert, but it was hard for him because he had so much pain associated with this church, and she had so much also this hope that she would be brought back into the church.
Right. Well, I was going to ask. I mean, there's so much here, Jessalyn. This is fascinating. So, like, your mother was excommunicated.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, do they send you a letter? Like, what is it? I mean, do they, like, frame this and put this on your wall? You are excommunicated from the church. Like, what? How do you even receive that information?
I don't know how
exists,
she got it, but I know that she can't take communion.
So, like, she would go. Would they know? Do you think, like...
no, but God knows.
Yes, right. It's just amazing that it's like I've never actually thought about this because I've never met anyone that was even 1 degree away from someone who'd been excommunicated. Because nowadays that's such an antiquated term. I mean, in some ways, I kind of felt like excommunications were done. They were like being done like 300 years ago. But I kind of forgot that this was something that was still living with us just a generation ago. But you're saying... the church knew that she was marrying a Jewish man. And she didn't get married in the church, and they said you're no longer allowed to take communion here.
Yeah,
you can be like you can be like a kind of foreign lay person. You can sit in the church if you want.
Yeah,
but you can't participate.
Wow.
And did she remain devout her entire life to God as a Catholic God?
She's so torn up about it.
Wow.
To this day. And interestingly enough, and this is where I think I get to this what's interesting to me is that at some point, as they got older, they both went deeper. They're still alive. They've both gone deeper into their attachment to their faith.
Wow.
And my mother got to a point where she got really stressed. This makes me emotional, that she had not been married before God.
Wow.
But they couldn't marry in the church. So they went to our rabbi, who was a Reform rabbi, who had married my sister, who had married my husband. And he said, I'll marry you. So my parents renewed their vows for their 40th wedding anniversary because my mother wanted to be married before God.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. I mean, and at least she can share that, Judaism and Christianity share the same God, ultimately.
Yeah.
So she could feel okay about that. Because
I
she's
think
still being
she
married by a
felt
rabbi.
in some ways that at least the Reformed Judaism had been more welcoming than her church had ever been.
Sure.
But she still will go to church. She'll find opportunities to go.
Wow.
It will sometimes stress my father. It's still, they are a very happy couple and they're a very intellectual couple and they talk a lot about things, but this is an area that is so charged for both of them. And I think as they get older and they look more towards, the later chapter of their lives, they are stressing about this relationship to God.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's a wonderful way to put that. They're like, they kind of realized they couldn't ever solve it between them, so they had to go further into their own relationship with God to like make peace with it.
Yeah.
Living together but separately on this issue.
Which they always have.
Wow,
Yeah.
this is absolutely gorgeous stuff, Jessalyn. Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I was nervous in a little way because I knew that it was loaded for me, but I also thought, this is kind of an opportunity for me to try to kind of figure out this puzzle because it's such a big part of of who I am. The odd thing is that the price of it in a way is that my sister and I have one sister, we had nothing, right? Because neither parent could influence us. My mother was never going to invite us to ask for us to be christened. We were culturally Jewish, I would say, and I identify as Jewish. I feel Jewish. A lot of Jewish people will tell you that I'm not Jewish because my mother's not Jewish.
Right.
But I feel
that's not
an
up to
affinity,
them,
right?
Frankly,
Yeah.
Some people would say that it's up to them if they're Orthodox or something, but kind of frankly, screw them. Like you get to identify the way you identify.
Well, it's interesting. Our lovely friend Dan, who hopefully you're going to get
Dan
to speak
Bukatinsky,
to,
who will be on the show eventually.
So when we were doing the play, all of us together, it was Yom Kippur, and I used to fast on Yom Kippur. But then my sister, whose husband is Jewish, when she had her second son, when they had the bris, I was the godmother, so I was asked to carry the baby into the bris. And the rabbi came up to me, who was a woman, and she said, "You can't carry the baby. You're not Jewish."
Amazing.
I know. It really devastated me. And so I had said to Dan, "Look, I don't fast anymore because I've been, I don't know where I sit." And Dan, God love him, and I won't tell his story, but he said, "Listen, it's not up to others to tell you who you are. You decide." And anybody who looks at, he was saying it, at his own profile could presume to tell him who he is and who he isn't, but he wouldn't give up that power. And that was really beautiful. That was one day in rehearsal. He really shifted my perspective on that, which was kind of amazing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Has it made you, so I'm sorry, so how long, I missed something. How long were you not practicing?
So let's say my nephew was born, 12 years ago.
Okay, so for 12 years, you no longer, you
I
stepped
just
away from
didn't
sort of
fast.
practicing any
I
of
mean,
the,
I did the
coincidentally,
Passover.
your daughter is 12 years. So your child's been alive, her life has coincided with this one further step away from practicing.
Right.
In the synagogue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But what you're saying is in the last year, you might have had to turn back towards understanding a way that maybe you would practice again in the synagogue. Have you started to practice again a little bit or go attend a service?
So I dance around this all the time. I've considered converting before. I have considered joining a synagogue. So then the other thing that I struggle with is that I don't, because of my own experience and because of just the way I feel about the world, I don't like anything that tells you that everybody in this room is chosen and everybody outside of this room is less than.
Right.
And I don't care what room you're in. I don't respond to that message. And that is a message that occurs really in any house of worship that I feel I've ever been in.
Yes.
So that to me has been what has caused so much suffering in my own family, is this idea of this side of the table is chosen, this side of the table is not chosen. So I'm always in this sort of dance with how much I really want to participate and how much I don't. And then ironically, I don't actually feel that any of this for myself has to do with God, because for me it has more to do with a kind of cultural affinity and a kind of respect and an honoring of my family and of how they suffered, and always wanting to be sure that I'm kind of standing in allegiance and kind of providing the example to kind of combat any kind of prejudice that is obviously ongoing and continuing to build. So I don't want to abandon the identity, because I think it's really important to be honest about it and to represent.
You're speaking specifically about Judaism.
Yes.
I mean, that's because that's not really a Christian burden anymore, right?
Right.
Maybe at one time, certainly for those of us that as I say, I was raised Catholic, we can all identify with, there was a time when Christians were thrown to the lions and things like that. That time is a long time ago.
Right.
That was in 300 AD or something. Constantine sort of makes it the universal religion, but the Jewish people never got that. I mean, and I just had Jeff Astroff, I was telling you a little bit about this on the show last week, and this is a man who's also raised Jewish, both parents Jewish, and very, very, very deeply resonates with him that he is one of a few that are paying allegiance, showing their allegiance to their cultural identity and the importance of keeping their way of life alive. And it's interesting that you feel that to some extent, you feel it actually quite a bit, but you're still struggling to figure out how that works, having been the child of people that were already one major step removed. Mm-hmm. So now you're another generation, so you're one more step removed. Mm-hmm. How are they gonna impart that type of devotion to you? And so now here you are struggling to find it in your own, and yet you feel a strong identity, like almost a sense. Do you feel a sense of purpose that maybe you really need to? It sounds like you're trying to articulate how to find your purpose with it in your day to day.
I do feel a sense of purpose, and I do feel responsibility to share it with my daughter.
Wow.
And so we do the high holiday, we'll do Passover, we'll do the high holidays, we'll talk about it, we'll talk about our family history, we'll talk about my father's experiences, and And we'll talk about world events, because I do feel exactly as you're saying, it's really complicated, because I don't know how much of it is actually spiritual and how much of it instead is, like you're saying, this kind of responsibility to keep the voice alive, because it's so, the image is so distorted.
That's okay. Everyone, we're going to get to listen to Jessalyn's phone call.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not quite sure.
Blessing.
Who is it? Who do I get to talk to?
I booked it. That's so great.
Oh.
No.
Great call. You were just about to say that you want to impart this to your daughter, and you're not quite sure. I mean, the key here that's so interesting is that here we have. This is no surprise to anybody that is Jewish or has Jewish friends or Jewish relatives, that the line between being Jewish and being a devout Jewish religious participant is blurry, because, the identity is so strong that you're Jewish, whether or not you believe in God. There are many people that will come up and say, I'm Jewish. One of my dearest friends will say, I'm Jewish. I don't really believe, or I don't go to synagogue, but I'm Jewish.
Right.
And I try to kind of say that sometimes, like I'm Catholic, because I kind of am culturally Catholic, but not in any way at the level of that.
Yeah.
And that's what you're sort of trying to articulate for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I wonder, I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe this will come through as you have these conversations. But there, one of the things that a lot of Jews talk about is survivor's guilt.
Yes.
And I feel that that's a little bit of part of it. Is I am so aware of my family history. I am so aware of how my Bobby, what challenges she faced and what she had to endure. And so I can't just abandon that identity,
right,
having known that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her, and that I know there were so many forces that worked so hard to make it difficult for her to bring a family into this world and to have us find, success and opportunity. That there were actual material forces that were trying to stop her from accessing that. I'm the part of her family, so you can't just throw that out the window.
That's so beautiful. It's a perfect place to take a break. We'll be right back. All right, everyone, we're back with Jessalyn Gilsig. It's what a great opening. Jessalyn, you've given me so much to want to ask you about, and you've been so beautifully articulate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So there are so many questions I want to ask, but the one I'm going to jump off with now is, when you met your husband, you're divorced from him now, but when you met your husband, did you go through a similar experience, in the sense that, was he in any way powerfully one direction or another as far as religion is concerned?
So I've never even really put this together, but now you ask the question. So my ex-husband had the same history as I did, which is to say that his mother was Christian and his father was Jewish.
How fascinating.
Yes.
I mean, not a surprise, I guess, because you have such an understanding, but continue.
Yeah, and
continue.
actually from exactly the same, Eastern Europe, and then before the war, and then his mother's of British and Irish descent.
Wow, even that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so, but he converted. So that he could be bar mitzvahed. So when he was 15, I guess 13, sorry, he was, not only did he convert, but he converted in a conservative ceremony, which he would talk about a lot because I think it was quite intense.
So he made it, was it a spiritual decision, or did he just want the presents?
No, I think it was his dad. I think his dad wanted him to be bar mitzvahed, but you couldn't be bar mitzvahed. I mean, this is the thing that I deal with my daughter. She can't really technically be bar mitzvahed unless she's actually Jewish. So he had to actually become Jewish so that he could be bar mitzvahed.
Right, and then of course, not to mention how his mother feels about this.
Right,
this is a wholly different thing, but there are all these complications.
You can have him on the show if you want. But I'm ambivalent, but.
Okay, continue.
But no, but actually, funnily enough, I hesitate to these are kind of delicate things to talk about, but I have always been more comfortable dating people who are Jewish. Because, as my mother put it, which is so interesting, my mother, who is Catholic, said to me once, I hope you marry Jewish because I never want you to be at a table where you're not accepted.
Wow, man, it's just so painful. It's fascinating as I now in back-to-back interviews here have, people being so beautiful and sharing the pain of what it means to be Jewish and the feeling of outsiderness that you live with all the time.
It's interesting for me as well because people often don't assume that I have any Judaism in me. So I hear a lot. I mean, I hear subtle anti-Semitism all the time.
Oh, fascinating.
From friends.
I didn't know that you identified as Jewish or were Jewish.
Right.
It's not something that you just ask people.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so there are many people, I'm sure, like
My
that.
name is kind of ambiguous. And so, but I hear friends of mine will just make these comments, little stereotypes, little digs, little concepts. And you'll say, gosh, it's just, I have to say, it must be that people are just raised with this prejudice, that it's just sort of built into our culture and it's so present. And it actually does make you feel, like you say, that there's sort of this ever present that, how quickly will this turn into something real?
Right.
So funnily enough, that's how my mother felt, having seen how we were not accepted as kids. She thought, well, you have a better shot, at least, if you marry Jewish. So my sister and I both married Jewish. And I definitely wanted to be married in a Jewish ceremony. And we were married by the same rabbi who married my sister to her husband, married my parents.
Yeah, right. You mentioned this earlier.
All the same thing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was amazing. He came out to California and he did the ceremony.
Wow.
And, I think for my daughter, I think she does take comfort in the fact that we both identify as Jewish. Again, it's confusing for her because she's not really Jewish, but still it's culturally who we are.
Boy, so you both were married in a Jewish ceremony. You're both Jewish. He converted. Mm-hmm. You'd never technically converted.
No.
But you would have had to convert for your daughter to be bat mitzvahed?
Yes.
Is that what that was?
Yeah, I'd have to be Jewish for her to be Jewish. Or at this point, I think she would have to convert.
And then her bat mitzvah is 15.
It's actually 13.
Oh, 13.
But listen, the Reform synagogues, I have friends who have similar profiles to mine. And they, again, it's like anything in life. You can kind of do whatever you want. You can have a party and say it's a, but if you really want to honor the tradition, then there are certain, obviously specifics.
And she's 12.
And she's 12.
Is this something that you're like?
We talked
are you
about
considering converting this year so that you can bat mitzvah her in a legitimate sort of setting, because you've just had also referencing the Dan thing? Maybe you've had a new rebirth in this.
I about every 2 years I start exploring this question.
Wow.
She and I have talked about it because originally I think she really did want to have a bat mitzvah, and I said, I'll figure out how to make this happen for you. And then I had a conversation with her and I said, look, the way I understand the bat mitzvah is it's moving into adulthood. It involves a lot of preparation, and there's a ceremony involved, and there's a lot of the ritual that I really like. I said, but I do want to kind of introduce to you the fact that it is that you will be using the word God, and there's the cultural relationship to the religion, but then what is the spiritual, and how do you feel about that, and what do you feel, and do you believe in God, and do you want to believe, and so that
the declarations of the bat mitzvah they're no joke.
Yeah, you're not just saying hey, I'm gonna do my chores and be a responsible adult. You're actually creating a relationship, talking about your relationship to God.
Yeah, this is the equivalent of the Catholic confirmation, which is what I went through. But
exactly.
Anyway, so I remember this.
Yeah, and it's certainly when you go through it at her age, now you're a conscious, not a 5-year-old. You're a conscious, independent thinker, and so I said, this is just a dimension of it that you and I haven't explored, and I'm fine with whatever, but I just want to know how you feel about that. And that overwhelmed her.
Wow.
Because it's not something that we talk about. And before I came Here, yesterday, she and I were driving, and I talked to her a little bit about this, and I asked her, what do you believe? What do you think? Do you believe in God? Because it's not, again, you were raised with this formal relationship and this almost, I'm assuming, an assumption that there is something, someone.
Oh, for sure. You're talking, I mean, I was super devout as a child.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And my parents are very, very devout. My mother was Lutheran but converted to Catholicism, and then my father to this day their Catholicism is deeply important. I mean, it's almost impossible to separate my father's faith from who he is. I would say it's impossible because he feels it so strongly. So that type of presence in my life was very strong.
That is so foreign to me.
Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
have absolutely nothing. I mean, I feel I don't. Although I talk all about this idea of this cultural identity, I have absolutely zero, even I don't even think there is anything.
Yeah,
nothing.
Wow.
I really, and I don't mind.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me.
Right. So you sort of sorry to interrupt, but no, you identify sort of essentially as an atheist in a sort of brass tacks sort of definition of your relationship to God.
Right.
But your relationship to your Jewish heritage
yes.
is very reverent. You have a deep reverence
yes.
for.
Yeah.
So you have this spiritual reverence for the relationship to the struggle of the Jewish history, which is.
And there's a lot I like about the Jewish faith. For example, so I think when you grow up with an awareness of the Jewish history, you have a kind of distrust of any kind of worship of somebody as if they're chosen by God. I don't like that idea.
Right.
I think that can lead to a lot of problems.
Yes, absolutely.
And what's interesting in the Jewish faith is that everybody is a scholar, right? It's all about the study of the Torah. And the rabbi is just somebody who has truly devoted their life to studying the Torah. They're the ultimate student. And the premise is that you are supposed to question, that you are put here to constantly question and to explore. And if you've ever been to a Passover Seder, they're fantastic because it's just all about questions. Why?
Yeah.
And getting into that idea of I love that. That to me is important. That to me is I trust that because it's freedom to explore ideas. So
yes, I love that about again there in any religion there is a spectrum of fundamentalism to liberalism,
of course,
with the way people relate to it. I have many friends that fall very much further on the reform to not even identifying in a sort of synagogue sense, but absolutely the idea that there is a sort of the core difference between Christianity and Judaism being that the Messiah has come for Christians and the Messiah never came, and so or has yet to come for Judaism, and so inherently you're when are you going to come?
Right.
What does it mean that you haven't come?
Right.
And then it inherently means that
there's
we're waiting
searching in
and we're
it.
searching.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that to me I identify that with my personal growth as that is God to me, is just the search, the question, the love of talking to people about all the different ways that we relate to what it means to be human versus what is the other, the divine. So anyway, that is I derail a little bit, I suppose, but the point is that you talking about what you love about the Jewish religion is this questioning.
Yes. Yeah. And I
or the search.
The search and the free, actually it's more the freedom, the fact that it's safe to ask.
Yes.
I think that's so important that it's safe to challenge. And certainly, once you have a child, as you know, you never want to think that you're putting them in any kind of, I don't relate to the idea of shaming her. I don't relate to the idea of her having been born in sin just by her mere presence. None of that resonates with me. And I think because it's such an odd thing because my parents do believe in God, and yet they never taught us they never introduced God to us. And I don't believe in God, but I really believe in life. I really do. I feel like this is enough.
Yeah.
I feel
that's beautiful.
Maybe this is what everybody's talking about. That, you know the love that you have for your child. You know the beauty of that. When you see, anything. I believe in matter, and I believe in what I can feel and what I can touch and what I can see. And it feels to me, if this is the one go round, I think it might be heaven.
Yeah. Oh man,
And
that's fantastic.
that's even with all the suffering.
Yeah.
That's even with all of it. I can't really believe that there's a higher power that's manipulating all of this and creating all this suffering. But I believe in life there's there's just beauty within the actual, the mere fact that we have the privilege to actually exist.
I mean, that's just so lovely, Jessalyn. It's so beautiful. And then I feel a lot of connection with that. And I think, one of the things that, at the risk of becoming too meta about the show we're doing, I think that, I would find it, I imagine it's difficult for anybody to argue that that's something they also celebrate, right? Mm-hmm. Even whatever spectrum of devotion you feel to your particular faith and creed, how do you argue with that beautiful sentiment, Mm-hmm. And I wonder how many people can also articulate that for themselves and wonder how that fits inside this larger structure. But you've clearly have an extraordinary beginning for formulating this on your own, because you had such a disparate upbringing in that way. So
I think that's what it is because everything else seems to have created so much conflict within my family, and it was all this investment of something that none of us could see, when in reality, what if we were just enough? And what if there wasn't, and all we had was this moment?
Yeah.
How would we behave differently?
Oh. All right, let's take the break right here, and we're going to come right back. That's just such a perfect way to end this moment. I don't want to try to... Let's just go out to the music. See you in a second. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's our last segment here with Jessalyn, and man, I've had such a good time talking to you. So, I want to ask, you just sort of so eloquently talked about your relationship to your heritage and the paradox you feel between having such a reverence for your heritage, but not necessarily having a reverence for a God-like being. I do, just out of curiosity, I feel like maybe that you've already answered this, but do you pray? Do you think about an afterlife? Are those things that I feel like you already answered the afterlife question, but do you have ways that what you would call prayer that maybe are not a typical prayer?
I have had moments in my life when I can think of, I think I've done everything. For example, I've definitely gone into a church and I've lit a candle. I've made wishes.
Right, right. Yeah.
I make wishes anytime I blow out a candle, that sort of thing.
Yes, I do too.
So I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But and the only time I've really thought about it is I've certainly had moments in my life, dark moments, when I've wondered if anyone's watching and if anyone cares. And I, in those moments, I have sort of tried to see, sort of said, I'm here, I'm available. Do you want to come and, does anybody want to engage with me? And
looking for a sign if you feel like dropping one my way.
There you go. To no effect. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. It's not that I'm not a cynic at all.
I don't get that sense.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not the way you just spoke about it.
Thank you. No, I don't feel that way. And I'm not cynical about other people believing. I understand why belief would be so helpful, because, sometimes life, it defies, the suffering that life can give you, can seem cruel and can be so lonely. And the idea of hoping that there's something greater than yourself that might somehow be aware and in some ways holding you. I can absolutely understand the appeal of that. I just don't feel it. I really feel, I remember working on a show once, and the other actors, we were sitting around a table and they were talking about, you know how people say things like everything happens for a reason.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And everybody comes into your life for a reason.
Yes.
And I was sitting there and I thought, no, it's random.
Yeah.
Life is random. You can draw lines after the fact if you like, but I feel there is no force that is in any way. I feel that it's random. I feel that it's science. I feel that science unto itself is spectacular. And
I agree.
I just don't think that anybody cares that much about us. I think we should care. That should be enough. It should just be, it is enough for me. And I really don't feel that I would hand over that responsibility. I feel like it's mine.
Do you feel like, knowing that, do you feel like there are things that you, deep impulses for creation or for even for travel or something that you feel because does it give you more of an immediacy to live your life in a certain way? Do you find yourself living does it bring you a certain type of immediate awareness to life? I feel like that's one way that people, I think, certainly can celebrate the idea of not looking toward an afterlife. You say it's about here and the now.
Yeah.
And so how do we make the here and now?
Well, you know, when we did the play together and you're doing a play every night and you're down in Culver City and a few hundred people have come and the rest of the world is going forward and it's really not that important in the grand scope of the universe. And yet when we're in that theater and we're telling that story and we're creating that escape for people and we're entertaining them and hopefully we're challenging them, but maybe the best part is that we're actually entertaining them. I mean, every time you would draw a laugh from somebody, you feel like that there was this gorgeous connection that had happened, and that has meaning. And so I think it's a part. I've always thought that no matter where I landed in time, that I would be an actor. That to me, that has a timeless kind of purpose, because that idea of storytelling and connecting with people and there's nothing that makes me happier than when people say, oh, you entertained me, you brought me joy, or you brought me reflection, or you brought me just an experience that seems to me incredibly meaningful and brings sort of texture and meaning to life that is satisfying to me.
Can you locate the beginnings of that as a child? I mean, did you find yourself entertaining your parents at different times?
Yes.
Or were you?
I was always that way. I was always becoming different characters, and I would leave the house and say, when I come back, this is my name. And yeah, I was
how great.
Yeah,
treat me differently. Like,
yes.
I'm going to be the character. Don't act like I'm not
guest.
the character.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful.
And I really, really wanted to die from consumption. I was really determined. So whenever I was sick, I would want to be on the couch and have my family come around and say goodbye to me.
Oh, wow.
It was very, very dramatic. And I read a lot, and I loved.
And your
all
parents
those.
and family entertained that.
They
You
were
have, do you have one
great.
sister?
I have one sister. I'm
she's
sure
older.
she was long suffering. I mean, I'm sure she was like, oh God, here we go again. But my parents were very sweet about it. My mother was very, very, very nice about it.
Wow.
As Halloween, I only ever went as an old lady. That's all I've ever gone as.
Really?
Isn't that bizarre? I wore the
Always
same
an
thing.
old lady?
Yep. I wore the same thing every year.
Okay, so is it because you identified what you wanted to be? Do you have a sort of connection to death in a way? Like, do you?
I mean, sometimes my friends
will
will tell me that I was sort of born old. I think I can be. I like,
certainly an old soul. You've heard an old soul kind
I
of
guess
thing?
maybe that's a nice way of putting it. As opposed to just
your
an
friends
old
are like,
lady.
you've been elderly for a very young age.
Sometimes I wonder. I don't know. But yeah, I always, from the time I was a child, I was begging to be an actor. And then I remember we had this typewriter. You probably don't know what that is. But
I'm familiar with
the
typewriters. I've seen them in museums.
Well, I had a typewriter, and I would type these things of, I know I'm only 6 years old, but I really want to be an actress, and nobody will listen to me. And so by the time I was 12, that was it. I was already auditioning, and I was working, and I never stopped.
Wow.
But I was determined. I just wanted to entertain. I remember that feeling of being in a space, which is so funny because for example, I do like going into houses of worship. I think it's what I love about, what I envy about people who do have that in their lives is there are so few spaces you can go into in the world that aren't about consumerism, right? You go into a mall, you go into a store, you even, any kind of space that's just built for reflection. And I do feel that in a theater. I feel as though there's something that happens and you had to be there. And if you weren't there, you missed it.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I really resonate with that. But of course, it's about the subject matter. At a certain point, if I was going to mass or something, and then the priest started, talking about some politically charged issue, then all of a sudden I'm turned off.
Yeah.
And this is not a moment of reflection for me. This is
Right.
a moment of, now this is political. And those are the traps of being in a place like that. But in a place where you're in the theater, you can be political, you can be reverent, but everyone understands from the get-go that this is a place for, gosh, now that I say that, it's going to make me reflect on Mass a little bit more. I'm going to have to get more. I'm going to have to articulate this more. I'm not going to spend the next 10 minutes talking to myself.
No, but it's interesting is where you and the content intersect, right? And that's so personal.
Yes, I think the point I'm getting at is, the priest will speak from a place of authority. And in the theater, we speak not from authority. We all know that we're not authoritarians in this regard. We're presenting ideas to you. And most likely we're presenting, at the very least, two opposing points of view.
Right.
And oftentimes many more than that. But it's up for you to understand what you witnessed and have your subjective viewpoint on it. Whereas the priest gets to totally dominate the discussion and no one gets to respond. And I resented that.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. The idea of it being this is just a concept. Now you ask questions.
Right.
I like that.
Right.
And your questions are what will actually expand the subject and the ideas, as opposed to this is already a fait accompli. I'm just handing this to you as a package, because who are we? Nobody knows. Who are we? Who do we? No one's the authority.
Right.
You're not the authority. I'm not the authority, and I don't like
authoritarians would argue with that.
I don't like handing over that power. I don't trust. Bad things happen.
Certainly.
Things happen.
Well documented all throughout history.
Documented horrible
Yes.
things happen when people start to tell you that they know better.
Yes. Oh, Jessalyn, good stuff. So this is going to be a bit of a or potentially a bit of a pullback on sort of the weight of the subject matter, but maybe not. It might surprise me. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about your mother, because I wonder, have you found ways to keep alive a sort of reverence for her side of the religious experience, even though I can see it on your face. You're like, yeah, this
question. I struggle with it.
Yeah.
We definitely do the I mentioned at the beginning, I give my daughter chocolate on Easter, and I'm very deliberate that we will talk about what the story of Easter is, because I think it's important to honor and recognize, this isn't just about going to CVS and buying some M&Ms. This is meaningful to a lot of people. And I want her to be educated on what these different belief systems are. I feel bad about this because I feel my mother in some ways is alone in this. And I don't feel any place in the church. I don't feel accepted in any way. If I go into a church, I think I am meditating on my mother all the time. And I feel that there is such a weight on her. And I feel for her because I would like her to feel a lot of what I'm assuming she once had, which I'm assuming she once, felt safe. And from what I can tell, she doesn't. And yet it is her identity. And that's fascinating to me. And she feels a deep allegiance to my father. Like just the other day, she's a very good friend who's quite religious, and invited her to come to, it was kind of like a prayer circle kind of thing. And my mother wanted to go, and she said, to my dad, not like, is it okay, do you have permission, but, are you comfortable, because I'm going to go. And he said, yeah, just promise me you'll leave if they say anything against the Jews, which of course she would. But it's always there.
Yeah, wow.
So it feels like this. And then there's her children. And like I said, the fact that she could be raised in the church and say, I hope you marry Jewish, because I know that there's a realistic possibility that if you sit at my family's table, they will never truly accept you.
Wow. I know.
It's her own kids.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary, man, it's amazing what the constructs of religion, the kinds of emotional and psychological weight that people live with.
Yes.
By growing up in all of these disparate structures, these are the ways that our modern minds are trying to grapple with these ancient traditions.
Yeah.
How do we keep them alive?
And then
in
how
what
do we
ways
stay
do we
connected?
Keep them?
Because what it gave them, when you do grow up like you did, I'm sure you had a community. I'm sure you had friends that came out of that. I'm sure your parents found support within their marriage from their community or from their priest, or
Absolutely.
So if we completely reject these structures, so to speak, and we become just purely individuals, then, can we still maintain a connection and a level of support? Why did I want to get married in the Jewish ceremony? Because, ironically, when my daughter was born, I took her to a naming ceremony at the synagogue because, and I remember thinking, it's not that I want God to see her, it's that I want a community to see her. I can't be the only one who sees her. I need others to know that she's here.
Wow. What a beautiful, it's beautiful. And what you're articulating is that you can have these things without the burden of certain heavily religious points of view if you don't want them. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, there's pushback from your community that says, maybe we really shouldn't give this away to you unless you do some things for us
commit.
Here.
Yeah.
And I didn't baptize my child.
Okay.
And I think that was hard for my parents. I imagine it was very hard. I know it was, but there are certain things we haven't really articulated on that deep of level.
I'm sure.
Because it is something that you don't want to hurt the other person for their way of being.
But you're at peace with that.
I'm at peace with it, because my feeling is that I can't ask my son to do anything that I don't believe. Mm-hmm. So there's no value to be gained from putting my son in a religious upbringing if I can't talk about it at home with any sort of reverence, Mm-hmm. And this is why I don't have any resentment to my father or mother for putting me through religious upbringing. And of course, I got a lot of my schooling. I like who I am as a person, and my life is inextricable from the upbringing I had. But they were totally believers.
Right.
They
They
are
walk the
believers.
walk,
They walk the walk. They're
Yeah.
generous, kind, loving, community-driven people, like many, many devoutly religious people are, Christian,
Sure.
Jewish, or whatever other religious structure you identify with. Of course, there are hypocrites. Of course, there are people that aren't. But, I am not that. I can't live that in any way that feels good. So this is so, and yet at the same time, there was a feeling of, gosh, I was talking to my wife. should we have some sort of baptism?
Mm-hmm.
Should there be some sort of gathering, And so I understand that impulse.
Yeah.
Because there is because the birth of life is still mysterious, and how can we not be reverent about that?
Right.
Oh, Jessalyn. I just think you came in and absolutely nailed it. Just knocked it out of the park.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because I really didn't, like I said, this has all been bouncing around in my head since day one, and I've never, ever, ever actually figured out how. I've never even talked about it before.
It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Clearly you're so articulate. You have such deep thoughts on these things, and you have clearly evolved to such a such an advanced place of understanding your position with it and your relationship to it. And I just cannot thank you enough for coming in and sharing it.
Thank you for creating the opportunity. It's awesome.
Man. And thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.